Aibowan, Vanakkam. I'm Vayoni Dimel. This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views and entertainment from Boston and USA. Challenges of the post-conflict Sri Lanka. Boston Lanka talks to a professor at Harvard University, Executive Director on Human Rights Studies. Is Sri Lanka on the right direction? Sri Lankan expatriate scholar on conflict resolution from Washington, D.C. share his views. Sri Lanka will go to parliamentary elections on April 8th, the first parliamentary elections after ending the 3-decade of civil war. One of the world's bloodiest conflicts has come to a violent conclusion in the island nation of Sri Lanka. The Boston Globe newspaper wrote in an editorial on May 19, 2009. That was about 10 months ago. Boston Globe ended its editorial with these words. Ultimately, the only way for Sri Lanka to avoid another Tamil rebellion is to grant the Tamils some form of local autonomy in their region. Now that the tigers have been crushed, the Sinhalese majority of Sri Lanka has no excuse for not addressing the legitimate grievances of the Tamil minority. Boston Lanka visited the Harvard University School of Law to meet Professor Jacqueline Baba, Executive Director, Harvard University Committee on Human Rights Studies, to discuss the importance of the human rights as well as the challenges of the post-conflict Sri Lanka. Professor Baba teaches at Harvard Law School as well as the Kennedy School of Government and also the co-founder of the Scholars at Risk International Network in USA. Professor Baba, it's an honor to have you in our news program. Let me begin by asking you this question. Is there a double standard the way the organizations like UN treats developing countries like Sri Lanka when there are no actions against some blatant violations on human rights by powerful countries?
So I think it's a very fair question. I mean, as you know, the UN is not a system of great impartiality, and power politics plays a big role. And so we have many examples, including the ones you mentioned, of powerful nations who do go to war, who commit violations which are not attended to. I think what we saw in Russia and with Chechnya and now the subway incident is a good example of how the international community focuses on some issues but not on other issues. Having said that, I think that there certainly are concerns about the situation in Sri Lanka. Of course, there's been this very, very long history with many atrocities, and now I think there was this great hope that with the peace process, that difficult and terrible past would be behind us. And so there's some concern, I think, that the current situation is still very complex and not exactly an outcome which is in all respects rights respecting. So there are concerns, and I think legitimate concerns, but of course we are talking about politics here, not just about a system of impartial international law.
Professor Baba, what would be the challenges Sri Lanka might have protecting and preserving the human rights now the war has ended and the reconciliation process has to begin to bring healing as well as economic development to all people in Sri Lanka?
So this is a huge challenge, and many countries face this challenge, especially after a very long, protracted and bitter civil war like the one that we've had in Sri Lanka. The standard mechanisms include truth commissions and opportunities for public airing of grievances, but they also include judicial processes where people are held responsible for violations of human rights committed during the previous period. And in some countries, they decide to go for amnesty to sort of put the past behind them. So there is not really one single solution. I think what is essential in all cases, and I'm sure this is also important in Sri Lanka, is that there should be accountability, there should be transparency, and most of all now there should be a sense of non-discrimination going forward. And I think what's been so concerning about the recent developments in Sri Lanka has been the sense that the divisions within the community are not being really put behind us, and that there isn't a sense of one nation. I think if that isn't really attended to, it'll be very hard to heal and to move forward. And you also raised a very important point about economic development, and of course that's crucial, because economic and social need is huge, and the war has exacerbated that. Again, one needs a system and a climate of security and rights respectfulness to also persuade the international community to invest, to get business up and running, to get opportunities. So all these things really rely on a framework of security, non-discrimination, rights upholding, which I think will be crucial for the future of the country.
To continue the conversation, we started in our earlier news edition about the future of Sri Lanka after the war. We invited Dr. V Ratna in Washington, D.C. Dr. V Ratna received his PhD in political science from McGill University in Montreal, Canada. His research focuses on ethnic violence and civil war, and he has conducted extensive fieldwork on ethno-communal conflicts in Indonesia and in Sri Lanka. Dr. V Ratna, as somebody who understands the conflict resolution methods, do you think Sri Lankan government is in the right direction since the end of the war?
The quick answer to your question is both yes and no. In some aspects, I think the government has made good progress. In others, not so much. So after the war, end of the war, government faced several immediate challenges. One being rebuilding the shattered infrastructure of the North and the East, then resettling nearly 500,000 internally displaced people, and of course also finding a lasting political solution. So they have made some progress in some of these. Infrastructural development is gathering pace in the North and the East. The economy is booming. There was a couple of articles in today's newspapers also. Hotels in the North and the East are filling up rapidly. Tourist arrivals have gone up. So in terms of the economy, I think there's fairly good progress. In terms of resettling IDPs, there has been some progress, but it's been much more uneven. So as of now, I believe nearly 70-80% of the IDPs have left camp. But we began to see movement only in December, a good 6 or 7 months after the end of the conflict. So the government kept on saying that they needed time to screen the IDPs to make sure that they were not LTT combatants, and that there was also demining which had to be done so that it was safe for people to go back. And all of this just makes sense, but I think the process could have been carried out faster and a bit more expeditiously. And also it's important to note that the resettlement process doesn't end the moment IDPs go back to their place of origin. The government needs to help them pick up the shattered pieces of their lives, assist them with livelihood maintenance, and so on and so forth. So there's quite a bit of work left on that. But where I think the government has fallen short the most, unfortunately, is coming up with a political solution. So we need a durable solution to ensure another LTTE doesn't rise up. There are legitimate grievances of the Tamil community that gave rise to this militancy. We need to address the root causes of the conflict. I think it's disappointing that almost 1 year has gone by and there's still no crystallized political solution or even like a draft of a solution on the table.
Sri Lankans will go to poll on April 8th. President Rajapaksa's United People's Freedom Alliance, UPFA, is eyeing for winning a 2/3 majority which will enable the president to amend the present constitution. 36 registered political parties along with 301 independent groups are fielding 7,620 candidates. 196 will be elected to the parliament. Remaining 29 seats will be filled by the parties according to the number of votes polled. That concludes our news edition this week. We meet you next week with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, bye.